Welcome to What the SaaS. I'm your host, Shaheem Alam, co-founder of FiveRings Marketing. On this show, I interview SaaS and tech founders in North America who are succeeding in their industry and provide them with the space to share their product and professional journey. Learn more from founders who are leaving a mark through innovation. Hey everyone, today on our show, we have Clark Van Oyen, co-founder and CEO of Cortico. Now, Cortico is a software built for clinics to automate patient management, saving clinics a ton of time and money in overhead costs and providing patients with a much better experience. Really excited to have you here, Clark. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for the kind words about our company.
Absolutely. Now, Clark, I know, Cortico has a ton of customers here in BC. I've used it myself to book appointments, but of course it wasn't always this way. So how did it all get started?
Sure. So it goes back 10 years, technically. At that time, this one medical clinic that I knew the owner from tutoring their son. He wanted us to do a little project for the clinic. So when I was tutoring him, we actually wrote some code to put the doctor's schedules on the website. And it was kind of a fun little thing. And about 6 years later, which is kind of more recent, about 5 years ago, the owner kind of came back and said, you guys built this for us a few years ago. And we've really been finding that we have all these really high admin costs at the medical clinic, and staffing is really a bottleneck for us for our business. It's hard to find people. It's expensive, and they're spending so much time on the phone. I know that if I got patients booking online and there was a good online system for patients to use, all that communication cost would go away, and patients would be happier too. But the problem is when I go and try all these products, none of them work. Patients won't use them. Maybe only 10% of patients will use them. So as the technical guy that this clinician knew, everyone has a programmer that they know or something. I was the person that came and looked at that for him, and I was running a software agency at the time. So we had to look at what they were using, and we had ultimately tried just building them something custom to see if we could get all of their very specific goal in mind. We wanted to get all their patients, instead of phoning the clinic, booking online, which these other products that were supposed to do it weren't accomplishing it. And we did. So that was really the aha moment where everyone was really happy, and it was clear that we'd kind of solved that very specific problem of getting the patients to actually use the online communication tools.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you had a software agency that you were running, and out of a project that you had with one client, I guess, this company really came about. So that's really cool. But what I'm surprised about is that, like, at the time, so when you built Cortico, there weren't other clinic, like patient booking softwares out there?
Definitely there were. I think there's a lot of things that are a little unique in the medical industry that results in software innovation being slower. In a lot of industries, you'd expect like online booking to be a solved problem 20 years ago. Yeah. And healthcare is kind of behind. And there are a few products, but they don't connect to the electronic medical record systems typically. Only a few of them do. And the ones that do, they have a pretty outdated user experience. And that's why, and they have issues where the company clearly hadn't measured and taken the time to go and determine why patients weren't using it and solve those issues. So that's what we did.
Gotcha. Because you spent time. And so, okay, so that's how your first client kind of came about. When did you realize that, that this isn't just a project? This is something that we're going to turn into a product and commercialize it?
That was really driven by the users. It was for about, since 2016, for a few years, people periodically came to us and asked us if they could use it. And we said, well, no, it belongs to this one clinic and it's a competitive advantage. Yeah. Why would we share it with you? And our mindset changed when we got to a certain volume and we realized, well, this is kind of bigger than just one clinic. This could be used all across Canada, maybe, because there's a lot of interest just in our neighborhood. So who's to say other neighborhoods wouldn't be similar, and it could really scale. So it took us a couple of years of people asking about it and refining it. And that time wasn't wasted because we were improving it during that time, incrementally, and really making sure that it was a great experience for patients.
Gotcha. So typically, like a lot of our listeners and typically startup founders, they go through a customer discovery phase where they reach out to customers and they interview customers, try to find the gaps and things like that. It seems that in your case, the customers were coming to you. They, I guess, heard about the software, or they used it and then they were coming to you and that's how the demand was generated? And did you do any other kind of, customer discovery or validation during that period or after that?
Well, we did with the clinic because we were a software agency. And of course, we have those processes. We have a discovery process. We have user experience design processes that we
Right.
applied rigorously within that clinic and with their patient base. And it just, I think, turns out that a lot of those things are the same for every clinic.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And it's also very like the timing is interesting too, right? Because I mean everything is going digital obviously because of COVID, and like online booking systems and things like that would definitely come out during COVID if they didn't come out before. So if we're talking about timeline, you had this ready to go and in place before COVID?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, about 6 months before COVID started, we'd made the decision to package it up as a SaaS product. So it was
Oh,
ready
wow.
to scale. So that was very lucky timing.
Yeah.
We basically had hit that decision point, and we were a little, I'd say a little frustrated actually, because all these people had asked us for the product, and then we'd
Mm-hmm.
gone to the work of packaging it up for them, and relatively few of them had actually pulled the trigger and implemented in their own practice. It's one
Yeah.
thing for someone to say they want something, and it's another to pull out the wallet and pay for you to solve that problem, and do go through onboarding, which is, means a lot of change management for their organization. There's all these implications that they hadn't really thought through when they were asking for it. So we were a little bit feeling like, well, we did that, but I don't know if the interest is really there. It was just kind of a little bit of smoke. But then when COVID hit, we suddenly had 10 pre-orders, and it didn't slow down for several months. So we kind of knew at that point. And on the agency side, some of our business had dried up as well, because organizations that were our clients were kind of freezing up their spending and just kind of trying to figure out what's going on. I think that happened to a lot of other agencies that were my peers as well. So we had this other, obviously, like one project taking off and our agency slowing down. So everyone just kind of shifted over, and we implemented a telehealth interface, like online video calling, in a month, because we were just focused on that.
Right. Really cool. So were you guys bootstrapped, or did you raise funds when you decided to, go the product route?
When COVID first hit, we were bootstrapped, and we formed a joint venture, and we just kind of, the product was of course losing money because it only had a few clients. And we just paid my agency and the medical clinic. The co-founders just paid for it, all of the kind of costs month to month. But then as things kind of escalated, we realized we didn't really want to be doing that. The alternatives, I think maybe 6 to 8 months in, we were kind of realizing that it could be a really interesting thing to look at doing a seed round. And we'd gotten in contact with Paul Broussard at Langara with Volition Advisors, and he kind of advised us on how to approach that, how to think about it. And that was really valuable guidance, because I think just understanding and navigating that, and when you don't understand something, you fear it as well. So I think prior to that kind of learning about the seed fundraising process, I was a little skeptical of it. I just thought, why would I want to bother with that? It sounds like a whole distraction from actually building a product.
Yeah, fair enough. For our listeners, what's some advice that you can share, based on your experience going from bootstrap to then raising that seed round?
Probably depends on your situation. Like, we were in a situation where we're kind of comfortable launching it, bootstrapping it, launching it ourselves. But we also recognized that as a SaaS product, it was going to be a long time before the revenue really could support the amount of growth that we would like to achieve. So having more outside funding was desirable, certainly. And I think it's not that hard to, I would say, get over if you have any reservations about even thinking about it, and you just think that's not for me, like, I would encourage founders to, I think this probably is the minority that are in the situation like me. Most of them probably are going to investors first in. But if you do have reservations, I would say overcome them and have those conversations, because it'll teach you to pitch your product better when you're having to tell the story to investors. And you're gonna have to think like an investor. To convince investors to invest in your product, you're going to have to convince them that it's going to make them money. So you have to convince yourself that you have to have a plan to make money, which you probably should if you're running a company. So I think it helps you get your ducks in a row and organize your company better. It can be pretty synergistic and positive. And my other advice is find investors that you like, that you want to work with, just like an employee. And getting an investor is like hiring an employee. Sure, they're the one giving you money, but you also wouldn't go work for a boss that you hate either, would you? Like, most people wouldn't, not for long. You want to find a boss that you love, a manager you love, and you want to find an investor that you really respect and that they're bringing something to your team. They're like another team member. Just because they have money doesn't mean that you're going to ignore that.
Right. So it's important to make sure that, it's not just someone writing you a check. It's someone that, that you like working with, but also, I guess, also believes in your vision and sees your vision, right? And then brings that kind of value to your team as well, right?
Definitely. Yeah, for me, that was really important. I think other people might be in a different situation for sure, where it's they feel like they have the team really well formed and they just need the capital and they want an investor that's more hands off. But I would definitely make that decision consciously, at least.
Fair enough. So now, kind of getting back to the product. We're a couple years into COVID now. How has your product evolved, if it has, right? Or you could just have a niche where it's working really well and we're sticking in it. But how is Cortico? Where's Cortico at today? And then where are you headed?
So we've expanded, I would say tentatively, to be the market leader for patient engagement for Oscar. There's a couple other players, but and Oscar is a particular EMR in Canada. It's the largest family practice EMR. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, and this is a claim that I'm making, and I've heard from other parties, but I don't want to. And how do you measure that? I guess I'm not certain. I suspect we process more appointments than any other system in that ecosystem, which is about 50,000 appointments a month. But I'm not even certain of that. So I don't have the numbers. So, but regardless, we've gone from we've gotten a large number of customers, I think by any measure, and expanded. And I think most importantly, on the product side, we've gone from being an online booking system to being a full suite of patient engagement software. So physical iPad kiosks for people to check in at the clinic. And this is, and SMS and email reminders, messaging system with the patients, efficient ways to send them their follow-ups, their handouts, their forms, do intake, and all these things. And I think the important thing is it's all been driven by conversations with customers. Just to finish my thought, I think Cortico's really has a unique product development method or methodology in healthcare, which is to work really closely with the actual healthcare professionals and get the doctors and the engineers together and really build something that they're really aligned with, which is a treat for them, because a lot of the time they get software kind of hoisted upon them that doesn't really work and they don't have a channel to provide feedback and see changes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that I see is, every product has a feature roadmap, right? But I feel like a lot of times that feature roadmap isn't being driven by accurate customer feedback, right? There's feedback, coming from all sides. There's feedback coming from customers. There's feedback coming from the salespeople. There's feedback coming from maybe marketing, and also top down, other executives in the company as well, in terms of what they want. How do you, and it seems that you've done a really good job of that. So is it really just that? Is it really just, speaking to customers, getting their feedback, and then prioritizing your roadmap? Is it, I guess, as simple as that?
I think it's not simple. It's a big topic.
Yeah.
Because I think talking to customers in a way, yes, it is as simple as that, because you have to do that, in my opinion, to sustainably build a great product. The people that are using the product, you need to understand them, and you need to understand their needs and their problems, and you have to talk to them generally to find that out. But they'll lie to you. They will tell you what they want. They will tell you how they want it to work. They will say that I want this text in the middle of your product to be font size 24 in bright red. We've literally gotten requests like that, and I think the key thing there is to ask why. Why do you want that? Well,
right.
And they might answer that, well, the patients aren't seeing it. Well, why do you want them to see it? And why is it so important? It's like, well, they're not remembering to check this box earlier in this form. It's like, well, could we pre-select that box if that's appropriate? And they're like, oh yeah, okay, we could do that. So I think trying to get to the need that's underneath the request is one of there's lots of lessons like that. I'd really recommend a book called The Mum Test if anyone's interested in that topic, that I felt like from my own reading is the most helpful single resource that I've gotten really good feedback from other people on it as well. And it's about how to suss out your customer needs.
The mom test. Okay. So how do you scale that though, right? Because I'm kind of thinking, okay, I agree. We shouldn't take the customer feedback at face value. We should dig in and ask why. But how do you do that when you have, tons of customers all giving you feedback all the time? Like how do you scale that?
It's really hard. And if we got it right, if I had an answer to that, we'd be much more successful. But there's lots of things that we've tried, and some of those things have worked. And I think it depends a little bit on your market, and is it a mass market product, or do you have key customers that are kind of champions that are giving you a lot of feedback, and you're rewarding them with a little more control of the product roadmap? Maybe there's a lot of different environmental factors in your company, I think, and how your relationships with those customers. But I think having some type of official forum for those discussions is helpful. What we've done is having a little feature forum where people can go and suggest a feature and upvote it. And what that does, there's a lot of subtle things, more than you'd think, more than I thought originally. It allows you to have customers heard. They really feel heard because their question is being posted publicly by your company. So you're obviously taking it seriously. Right. And you're really trying to get to find out, to understand it, right? If you just say, okay, yeah, we'll look into that, and they don't hear anything back and they don't see anything, they're going to feel dismissed, even if they weren't.
Yeah.
And you want to protect your relationships too. So by posting publicly, then you can kind of prove to them that, no one's really supporting you on this. I'm sorry, but there's all these, and they can see all the other features there that have tons of upvotes and have engagement. So you're kind of pushing the ball back into their court. It's like, okay, well, demonstrate that this is going to help more people than just you, and that it really matters. And by having some type of mechanism, and I think a feature forum is one way to approach that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you kind of then get them involved in the process as well. And it forces them to think of kind of like answer the whys themselves, right? Those why questions. So no, super cool. Yeah. So Clark, so now it seems like, Cortico, it's not just a patient booking system. It's a complete patient engagement platform. What do you have planned for the future?
Well, part of, I think this is where FiveRings has, I guess, been involved a little, where we've used FiveRings for doing LinkedIn outreach to reach new markets and to research new markets. And that's an ongoing thing. I'm still not confident about which markets are the most promising to enter first. But what I do know from talking to clinics all across different markets is they all have the same problems by and large. I think every healthcare professional on the planet, more or less, is wasting an hour of their day with software that isn't doing its job well enough. And so that's really become personally my driver and my motivation when I see our customers telling a story about how Cortico is able to transform their clinic, and they're not wasting all this time that they used to spend all this time doing data entry of some kind, or all of this time clicking dozens of buttons just to process some simple workflow, or having to play phone tag with patients, and that's gone, and they're not doing it, and they're so grateful for that. And I think, and the team that's a positive feedback loop. The team's addicted to hearing those things, and we want to do more, and we want to do that for everyone if we can.
That's awesome. Cool. So Clark, before we wrap up here, what's one lesson or piece of advice that you would, leave our listeners with that are, again, like in an early stage SaaS founders or startup founders like yourself?
Well, if I think back to maybe 2 years ago, what advice would I have given myself? I think maybe with my early customers, digging in a little bit more and not worrying so much about getting them to commit to the product, because those first customers are really partners. They're really part of your company, just like your investors are. They might not own any shares or get paid or even get a discount or anything, but they are a critical member of your community as a startup. Yeah, because they're giving you all the information. They're your most important source of information of what your product should be, and they will tell you. They won't tell you verbally, but you can look at them using your product. You can watch them, and you can see if they're happier and if they're more successful, and you can tell that story. And that's kind of everything for for a startup is you have to solve a real problem out there in the world. So recognizing that that's really their role, those first customers, and engaging them a bit more appropriately that way. I think I was just kind of treating them as customers, whereas really they were, I think I should have done interviews regularly with our early customers and put in more effort to understand deeply what their real problems were that we were addressing, which ones we weren't. And I think that would have accelerated our roadmap, and it would have allowed us to sell more quickly, ironically, even though at the time I probably would have thought that was a waste of time to focus on.
That's great. I think that's great advice, honestly. I really like the weight that you put on customer interviews and customer discovery and really understanding your customer problems. I think that's something that we also learned kind of like a year into our journey that we needed to do as well. So yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Clark, thank you so much for joining me here on this show. Where can our listeners find and connect with you?
My email is clark.van.oyen@cortico.health. And I guess we do have on most of the social media platforms, we have an account that's varying levels of activity. We have a podcast as well that's on Spotify and other podcast distributions. So yes, but yeah, I'm always, anyone who's interested to ask me about anything, the lines are always open. I'm interested to chat, so drop me a line.
Awesome. Thanks, Clark. Great to have you here. Don't forget to follow this podcast for regular SaaS stories and updates on new cutting-edge technology. If you enjoyed the show, please share this podcast with your colleagues. We also have a Slack community made just for tech founders, leaders, and investors called What the SaaS, where we provide resources, networking, funding opportunities, and more. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.